Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Friends of Flight 93 speaker series. My name is Brooke Neal. I'm the Director of Programs with the Friends of Flight 93. So on this slide, we just tell you a little bit about the Friends, who we are, how we provide resources to the National Park Service, and how we especially focus on educating the public and the next generation. So today, we've got a really great guest speaker, Jack Grandcolas, and we're going to have a moderator today, Tom McMillan. So some of Tom's bio is on the screen here, and Tom, I'm going to let you take away the program. Go ahead.
Thank you, Brooke. As she mentioned, our very special guest tonight is Flight 93 family member Jack Grandcolas. His wife, Lauren Catuzzi Grandcolas, was a passenger on Flight 93. Looking back to September of 2001, Lauren was east to attend her grandmother's funeral, and she stayed a few extra days because she wanted to surprise people when she got back to California with the announcement that she was pregnant, that she and Jack were expecting their first child. So that adds a level of poignancy to this story that doesn't even exist with some of the others. Jack has not been to the memorial for some time, perhaps 15 years, but he's coming back this year for the 20th. So we're excited to have him back and joining us tonight. So Jack, first of all, just welcome and thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. It's great to be here, and I appreciate people coming to on a summer evening.
You know, we've got a great crowd out there. Jack, as you know, we're going to talk about Lauren and what kind of person she was. We're going to talk a little bit about the legacy that she and the others left. And we're going to talk about, and folks, Jack has agreed to do this. He wants to talk about your grief and how you dealt with that and how you've coped with it over the years. But just to frame it, to start it, let's go back to that morning, September 11th, 2001. And for the crowd, just remember, Jack was in California. So remember the time frame. The first plane hits the World Trade Center at 8:46. That's 5:46 his time. Flight 93 is hijacked at 9:28. That's 6:28 his time. So he's in that different time frame than those of us on these. Can you just take us back briefly to that morning, Jack, and how you found out and how this story all unfolded for you?
Well, yes. Actually, I'll start with the evening before, where I had a friend over for dinner. He and I just had dinner, and I had called Lauren, and you know, it was 3 hours time difference, and she said, I'm not going to call you before I go to bed tonight because my sisters and I are going to watch a movie. And she was going to have her favorite bowl of popcorn mixed with spinach and other vegetables. A wonderful dinner that she loved with movies. But so that's the last time I spoke to her, was that evening before September 11th. And the movie they were watching that evening, ironically, was Castaway with Tom Hanks. So the next morning, in San Rafael, California, we lived in a 2-story home, and we had the ringer in the upstairs master bedroom off on the phone because at the time there were telemarketers, and there was no do not call thing that could stop them from calling, and they start on the East Coast at 6 a.m. So, you know, we got tired of that, and we would just turn the ringer off in the bedroom. And so that morning, I faintly remember hearing the phone ring downstairs, and I remember it ringing several times, and I thought, oh boy, those, you know, just thought it was pesky telemarketers, and I went back to sleep. When I did wake up, it was just a hair after 7 o'clock, and I remember just kind of looking out at the sky and seeing this very unusual image in the sky, kind of going upwards, and I remember it striking me and I thought, who do I know that just passed? Because it looked like an angel, apparition of an angel going up. I didn't pay any attention to it at the time. I turned on the television, start my day to shave and watch the news, and of course, like everybody else out there, watching it unfold in shock and horror. Obviously, my first thought was about Lauren, and then I realized, no, she's on a later flight. She's been grounded. My next concern went directly to my older brother, Jim, who was a pilot for American, and they were talking about American flight out of Boston, and he flew in and out of Boston and New York And so I just wanted to see what was going on. I was about to call him when I received a phone call from Lauren's sister, Vaughn. And Lauren had stayed at Vaughn's house that night, left that morning. And she said, have you heard from Lauren? And I said, no, I have not. And is she not with you? I thought her flight would be grounded. And she said, no, that the car got to the house early, and Lauren got in her car and in the car and then went to the airport. And Lauren was not someone who ever got to an airport early. I can assure you that. But this particular day, there was no traffic, and she got there early. There was a light load, Flight 93 headed to San Francisco earlier. It gave her the opportunity to have a room to stretch out and get home earlier. But I didn't know any of this at the time. So I received a phone call from I hung up with Vaughn, and I received a phone call from a friend in Houston who was worried about me because I flew to New York every month. And I said, I'm fine, but I'm worried about Lauren. And that's when I went downstairs and I saw the answering machine back in those days when they had the blinking red lights, and turned on the television so that I could continue to find out what's going on. The first message was from Lauren. It was calm, and she was saying that she was on the earlier flight. She gave me the time that she was going to get home, what time I should pick her up, and just a regular phone call you would expect from your loved one. And that made me nervous. At the next message was her from the plane. And it was equally calm. It was unbelievably calm, and it was very caring. And she's just said, Jack, pick up, sweetie. Okay, I just want you to know we have a little problem on the plane, as if they were going to take care of it. And she was very, very calm, and I could tell didn't want me to get worked up. She says, I'm fine and comfortable for now. I just want you to know that I love you more than anything. Just know that. And she said, I'll, as we all do, say, I'll call you back, or she stopped herself, and I know why, because she didn't want to leave a haunting promise that she was going to call me back when she knew she might not be able to. So she was very aware of the dire straits they were in, but was courageous and brave in the way she wanted me to know that she loved me more than anything. She seemed as if she wanted to shield me or possibly not be able to say some things. I don't know if she was being watched while she made the phone call, but she just said, I love you more than anything, know that, and please tell my family I love them too. And that's pretty much the context. At that moment, I knew that there was a problem. I looked at the television, and they were showing the crash site in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. I dropped to my knees. They said it was a United flight out of Newark. And that's pretty much when I knew that she was on that flight.
Wow.
The aftermath of that was a phone call from a friend that I had dinner with the night before, and he was saying that he was on his way to New York and his flight was canceled. Isn't this crazy? What's going on? And I had to tell him that Lauren's flight crashed. He had a long pause, and he said, I'll be right over. Within minutes, I had not only he and his wife there, but probably a dozen other friends that were coming over to, protect me, help me, support me from whatever angle they could. Media started to show up. I had to deputize a couple of friends to just go tell them we're not going to talk right now. I was then summoned by one of my friends that the FBI was at the front door, which seemed to me a little odd that they were there, but I knew what they were there to deliver, and it was the news that Lauren was on flight and that she had perished. What surprised me was that they also knew that she had called, and they asked about it, and I told them, yeah, there's 2 messages on the answering machine. They asked if they could hear them. I said, sure. And they came in, 2 rather husky guys and intimidating looking guys, and I played the messages for them. And I don't think I've ever seen two bigger men weep like they did. And so they asked if they could take the messages to scrub them and see if they could determine if they could hear some background noises. And I told them, I said, well, if you can give me in writing that you're not going to let this, be aired anywhere else, because at that time, it was very private and very personal, and her parents and sisters hadn't heard it. So I wanted to make sure that they were protected. The FBI said they couldn't do that. So I said, you cannot take it. And they understood, and they walked out. And after I shut the door, some of my friends looked at me and they said, did you know you just stared down the FBI? And I said, I don't care. And I didn't care about anything at that moment. It just was that much of a gut punch at the time. And the second worst part of that morning was I had to lay down because I felt like doubling over and throwing up all the time. And I got a call, and one of the friends came in and said, it's your father-in-law. And I said, oh Lord. So I said, hello, Coach. And he said, hey, Jack, how are you? Like we always talk. And I went, not good. And I thought at that moment, I said, he does not know. And I had to share the news that Lauren's flight had gone down and there were no survivors. It was the second worst part of that day for me, to have to tell Lauren's parents the news. It was gut wrenching. So it was pretty much a blur from there on out. The rest of the day was obviously just a nightmare.
Well, thank you for that. Just incredible memories, Jack. I think we're all feeling for you even 20 years later. But I know we want to talk a little bit just about Lauren. I know you want to talk about Lauren. And tell us, the people on this call know a little bit about her story, but just a little bit. Can you tell us who she was? What do you want us to know about her?
Well, Lauren was born the middle of the second of three girls to Larry and Barbara Catuzzi. She was born in Bloomington, Indiana, which is near where I grew up, although she didn't grow up there, as her dad was, as I mentioned, coach. He was a football coach at IU. And then they moved to Ohio, where he coached under Woody Hayes. They moved to New Jersey, where they spent many of her formative years growing up there. And one of the stories I love to hear about Lauren was this: when she was a little girl, when they asked her what she wanted for Christmas, she said her own bottle of ketchup. She was a very independent person. She was a very pensive person. She was, a beautiful person, a petite, beautiful person. But she just had a playful, fun, serious and courageous side to her throughout her life. And she was a joy to be around, and she was probably the best friend you could ever ask for, because she really cared selflessly about others. I don't know, do you want to hear more? Because I could go on forever. Tom.
Well, I can nudge you along a little bit, because obviously folks know we would have discussed this a little bit ahead of time. I know, that to a lot of the public, the Flight 93 counterattack centers around four guys. And we at the memorial and family members like to tell that this was a lot more than just, those four were involved, but this was a group effort, very much a group effort. And I think sometimes we draw on people's personalities to see what they might have done. I know you believe that Lauren, the way she was, certainly would have been involved in some of the planning. Can you just frame that for us a little bit in your vision of how she would have handled that?
Certainly. As I mentioned, she was very active. She had a note pinned to the refrigerator: "Get busy living or get busy dying." She didn't suffer fools. And as I mentioned, she was the daughter of a football coach. So she was a lot around a lot of testosterone in her life, a lot of male, strong males. But Lauren felt that women could do anything men can do. And in fact, she went out of her way to prove that time and time again. I mean, she was petite, but pound for pound as strong as any man as I ever met. And within her soul and her mental capabilities, you know, much more clever than most men. And she loved to kind of, you know, take that angle. But she, a great example of her leadership was that she worked for Price Waterhouse, an accounting firm, you know, gray flannel world. And they're going to pitch the Nick Graham, founder of Joe Boxer, a very colorful, flamboyant underwear company, because he's growing hand over fist, and they needed a new accounting firm. Well, right before they were invited to go into his office for the pitch, Lauren stood up and took 3 pairs of boxer shorts, Nick Graham Joe Boxer shorts, out of her briefcase and told the 3 gray flannel suit wearers to put them on over their pants before they went in. And as soon as they walked in, Nick laughed hysterically, said, I've seen enough presentations. You're going to tell me the same thing, but you get me, you're hired. And that's the way she did her research and then acted. So I would imagine her, and again, you cannot use conjecture to convict or acquit anyone. So a lot of what was used to, you know, frame who was heroic and who wasn't is just that, it's conjecture. Now we know from a lot of facts that certain people were, you know, doing certain things. That's for sure. I imagine that Lauren would have been involved for sure. She might have been sitting there tapping her watch saying, we got to get going, guys. She might have been saying, Jeremy Glick, you are a judo champion. You lead the way. Lou Naki, you get right behind him. Yeah, she was an organizer. She made lists of everything. She got that from her dad. So she was a coach's daughter. She had the ability to lead, even though she was this petite young lady. And she certainly wouldn't sit by idly because she was EMT trained. She, you know, had learned how to skydive. She learned how to scuba dive. She was involved, and she would have been involved. And I'm certain of that.
She also had been working on a book that she was writing that in the end her sisters ended up finishing for her. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, she was starting a book. It was a handbook for adult women. It was a guide to living life to its fullest, and it was called You Can Do It. And I remember she used to tell me things whenever I got a little bit down or felt like I couldn't do something. She'd say, you can do it and I will help. And the book basically came from the premise that when she was a Girl Scout and a Brownie, you know, she had a sash that would earn badges every time you learned a new, you know, whether it's sewing, canoeing, or whatever. But she recognized as women grew older, they didn't have that sort of society. And that what was missing from a lot of women's lives were growth, because they were too busy working, taking care of the kids, you know, routine. And so she wanted to, she would hear her friends say, oh, I want to do that, but I don't know how to get started, or I don't know where to begin or how to put time away. Well, this book was a self-help guide for doing that. It wasn't Lauren's book, it was her idea, because the book is written chapter by different people who were experts in those sort of fields, be it gardening, skydiving, scuba diving, cooking, whatever. But the idea was to earn an adult badge in those things for the women, because it gave them more self-confidence, more courage, and the ability to be proud of themselves, which is something she had learned by doing the very same things throughout her life.
As we shift to just a slightly different topic, I wanted to share with you and the audience some quotes that Jack gave in his oral history. As you know, the volunteers at the Flight 93 National Memorial are still compiling oral histories, family members, first responders, all those involved. Jack did his very early. It was not long after his first visit to the crash site, not long after September 11th. And he said, love conquered hate in that field right there. It really was the first victory against terrorism in our battle back, and it came over me that way. It wasn't easy to adjust to that, but that's what struck me about the place. It seemed like a divine location high upon the hills and in a beautifully rolling Pennsylvania field. It was a disturbed harmony, but in a way hopefully will inspire. And he went on to say, this plane happened to have a certain significance to it that can ring forward as the silver lining to a very gray cloud of September 11th. That's what I think keeps us walking on. And what struck me, folks, is Jack used those phrases, silver lining and gray cloud. This was probably 2001, 2002. He said this. We were talking 2 weeks ago about this legacy. He used silver lining and gray cloud. So those images, I don't know if you even remember saying that, Jack, back then, but those images are in your mind and very much a part of this story of the legacy of what Lauren and the others left us.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first victory against terrorism on our soil. I found it ironic also that it wasn't far from Gettysburg, another famous battle in our American history. You know, these were ordinary people put in an extraordinary situation, and what they did was absolutely unbelievable. It is striking how quick they did their reconnaissance. They grouped together, took a vote, which was the American way, and came up with a plan. And they knew the plan might cost their own lives. There was hope they might wrestle the plane and get control, but they knew that they were fighting the odds. But they certainly weren't going to let anyone else be affected or killed on their watch. And they even decided when to attack because they knew if the plane goes down, they wanted it to be a rural area. I've always felt there was a lot of divine elements to the passengers on that plane. Many of them weren't, like Lauren, weren't supposed to be on that plane. And there was a lot of irony in some of the people that were on that flight. So from an American standpoint, every September 11th, we have one less horrific building to see that was destroyed by a plane. We can't imagine the White House or the Capitol videos in flame had these courageous people not taken action and fought back and turned the tables on the terrorists. They terrorized the terrorists. And I think that was a signal and is kind of, you know, encapsulates what the United States is about. Because if you look at the manifest, which was all heroic, it is a melting pot of individuals, black, white, men, women, gay, straight. I could go on, you know, of many ethnic backgrounds. And that also struck me as a symbolic sort of victory, that you weave together all these different people to do one courageous act.
And you certainly have been at the crash site, but you haven't been there for a while, to the memorial. Are you kind of anxious, curious to get back this year to see what it really has been developed on the field that you saw very early on?
Yes, I am. I went for several years early on and vowed that I wanted to, because it was very, very painful, not only for me, but you see the others who lost their loved ones, lost their dad, their grandpa, their son, their daughter. It just was really gut-wrenching, but also beautiful. It's wonderful how it's been honored, our loved ones. And I vowed that I would come back after the final bell is hung, and to see what it's like versus, you know, back then versus now. It'll be a cathartic chapter closure. I've said that throughout the last 20 years. There's always chapters of closure. You never really get closure. You never really want closure because you want to remember them. I don't think I could be here today if I didn't think of Lauren every day, because she inspired me to get up, get out of bed. You know, don't let them get you too. They may have got me, but don't let them get you too. This is you know, I can hear her stern sort of, you know, get up there and be the guy, show people the guy I married, you know, that sort of thing. So, and also from the outpouring of support. I mean, you know, hundreds of and whatnot from friends and people that were strangers came in. But the one that I think struck me the most to move forward was from a former president of a company I really admired. His name was Ray Galkey, and he wrote, "I don't know what to say. I don't have the words to say it." He says, "All I can tell you is what I've learned from sailing." And he says, when you're learning how to sail, there's only one way through a storm, and you've got to meet it head on. And having walked to the dark abyss, I looked in it and I said, that's not where I want to go. So I turned around and started walking in one foot after another to meet the pain and sorrow and challenges of new world head on.
Can you tell us just a little bit about, I'll just frame it this way, the U2 story?
Yeah, that's well, I'll have to go back and say that when Lauren and I met, we were at the University of Texas, and it was, you know, a kind of a time when U2 was a brand new band, and I had called her up, and she said she was trying to get tickets, and so I said, oh, I'll get tickets. And when I went to her apartment to give her the tickets the night of the concert, she was brushing her teeth and she had, you know, the door open, and I knocked on it and she said, oh, the money's on the table, just leave the ticket there. And so I stood there and I had a bottle of wine and some flowers, and she turned around and she said, oh, this is a date. And so I didn't make myself real clear, I guess. But that was our first date. It was a U2 concert. And it was in 1985, February 1985. And so fast forward, it was her favorite band. On her 30th birthday, she wanted to go skydiving. So when they do the video, they also let you pick a song to attach to it. And she picked One Tree Hill by U2. Now, One Tree Hill is a song that Bono wrote for a friend who died in an automobile accident. It's not one they play in concert. So in 2005, after 9/11, I'd become friends with Sean Penn. He lived a few miles away from me. I met him at a party that Nick Graham had, and we became friends. And I was over at his house, and I told him I wondered if we could go to the U2 concert in the fall. And he said, yeah, I'll get us tickets. So we went. We were backstage, met the band, there was a host of rock and roll and other actors. Robin Williams was down there, Lance Armstrong, Jerry Harrison from Talking Heads. It was a great group of people. It was a really warm, wonderful night. And when the band went up on stage, they did their whole gig. And at the end of the set, they sang One Love. Bono comes out onto the stage with an acoustic guitar and just a spotlight on him. And he raises his hand and he bows his head and he says, this song is for beautiful Lauren. And I looked at Sean and I said, did he say what I think he just said? And he said, Sean gave me this wirely, you know. And then Bono and Edge went into a rendition of One Tree Hill. And the song is about life. It's a river to the sea of afterlife. And he did an a cappella version, and he changed the words from he runs like a river to she runs like a river to the sea. And then he said, God bless you, Lauren. And of course, by then I'm losing it. If you'd had told Lauren while she was alive that was going to happen as a tribute, she would have said, I died happily. And then she also would have said, get in the car, we're going to take you because you need to have your head examined. That would never happen. But it was incredible. Afterwards, at the after party in San Francisco, got to spend 30 minutes talking just one-on-one with Bono. And Sean comes over and I had kept the ticket stub from 1985 in my wallet as a memento of our first date. And Sean says, did you show him the ticket stub? And I said, no. And Bono says, let me see it. And I showed it to him and he looks at it and he goes, 1985. He says, we were a baby band. And then he looked at the price tag, $12.50 for the ticket to the concert. And he says, we weren't worth shit either. But he then asked me if he could sign it. And of course, a friend who was eavesdropping, the pen comes right over my shoulder, hand it to Bono. And he sits down and he writes on the front, like a river to the sea, Lauren. And he turned it over. He says, see you for a swim, Bono.
Wow. Wow. What a story. Now, I know, Jack, we've talked, and this is all leading a little bit to this. You've talked about wanting to speak about your dealing with the grief through these 20 years, how you've had to cope with it. And in a way, letting people know that it's okay to seek help and deal with it. Can you just talk about, what you dealt with, what we normally call PTSD, and you have framed for us as PTSI. It's a little different approach. Can you go into that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, it occurred to me very early on that, there was going to be tough struggles, no question. It was a new life. It was a new, you're speeding down the highway of your regular life. We were just two normal people. You see the picture there. That's from our little home in San Rafael. And after she had learned that she was finally pregnant, and then you get tossed off the highway of life, and you're barefoot and you're walking on a stone gravel new path that you got to figure out how to walk. So I, in the first 3 months, lost 30 pounds. And it was sometime early in January that I called my doctor and I said, I think I have cancer or something. I'm losing weight. And he had me come in, check me out, and then he laughed and he said, you're fine, you're just depressed. And I said, oh, really? What is that? I was a kid from the Midwest, and mental illness, depression had stigma to it. So I didn't really know how to deal with it. I never really had addressed it or thought of it. And he said, see a counselor, they can help you. And the counselor, and I did, and I went to see him every week, twice a week for 6 weeks. And he really helped. He really helped me understand what depression was. He says it's a dark thing that creeps into your life. You don't know it's there, and it suppresses your appetite. That's why you're not eating. And I went, okay, how do you get out of this? How do you beat it? And he says, have pace and balance. Okay, riding a bike, pace and balance. I get it. Take care of unfinished business. Okay. And that helped me too, because I had kept a lot of Lauren's things. You hold on to the clothes that remind you of her smell, of times you were together. And so you can get stuck, and he helped unstick me. And that was in 2002. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to keep that pace and balance. But it was years later that what manifested was I didn't know how to mourn the loss of the unborn child. So I went back to see a therapist, and she said, oh yeah, very understandable. It was an entity you didn't know. You knew Lauren, but you didn't. You've got mysteries running around in your head like a snow globe. Was it a girl? Was it a boy? We didn't know at the time. What would it be like this year? What would that child be like next year? What would that child? So every year it was hitting me harder, because you expect to be a father, and then you're not. You're a widower at age 38, which is a new way to figure out how to live. So I did kind of medicate, self-medicate, and I didn't know why. And through her treatment called EMDR, which is where they just move their fingers back and forth and ask you questions, and it's used on a lot of the trauma victims from war, we figured out that I needed to mourn the unborn child. She asked, had I ever done anything to memorialize the unborn child? I said no. So that was a chapter that needed closure. She also suggested that I write all this down and say maybe someday publish a book. And so I thought about that, and that was some 6 years ago. But it was when she said I had PTSD, I said I thought that was a combat zone injury, and she said no, it happens to a lot of people. It's an injury. And that's why I say it should be PTSI, because it's not a dysfunction. It's an injury. It's a shock. And everybody goes through some sort of brain shock in their lives. Some are more severe than others, but loss is definitely one of the biggest ones. And when you lose someone, and you know, it's traumatic. So I want to destigmatize the term PTSD to PTSI, because it's an injury just like if you broke your arm. Now, if you broke your arm, you go to the doctor and you get a cast. The same thing should be true if you have been injured mentally by some trauma, and you should seek that counseling. They're very good. They're very helpful. It's something I wholly endorse, and I hope to support through donations from the sale of my book, which will come out next April, as a tribute to the unborn child. Dear son or daughter, I'm writing this to you at the advice of my therapist, and then I'll tell the story of Lauren, of myself, and of the last 20 years.
So that's, you talked about different levels, different chapters of closure. That, I'm assuming that will be one as well when the book comes out.
Absolutely. I have since remarried. We'd like to kind of put the closure to this, and it's again, it's never full closure, but it certainly helps move forward in a happy, more personal way.
And folks, I can tell you, Jack's given me the honor of taking a sneak peek at that book. I can tell you, you're going to want to read it. It's quite moving. I know there's still some work to do, so it's one we will all look forward to. Jack, I know Brooke and Danny have been collecting questions. I think people have been sending in questions, but before we go to that point, is there anything else in this story, now that you have this group here together and you're about to come back for the 20th anniversary, that you would like to say that we haven't touched on yet today?
It's there's so much I could say, about Lauren, and what a special person she was, and all the people on that flight that I've gotten to know. In fact, it was Kimmy Bevan who lost her husband. They lived in Berkeley, California, just not far from us. Dorothy Garcia, who lost her husband, lived in the South Bay, not far. And I would lean on them, and they would lean on me, and we'd have discussions that would help pull us through, because we'd have thoughts and we'd say, is that crazy? And we'd all agree, no, we have the same thoughts, we have the same feelings. So it really helped. In fact, it was Kimmy Bevan who one night we were talking, and she said, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I don't know, I'm not, it's December. I said, I'm just hanging out at the house. And she said, you need to get out of the house. You need to get out of that house and do something. And I said, well, I was invited to this Christmas party at Nick Graham's house, because Nick and I had become friends, because he remembered Lauren so well from that day. She had these executives walk in with the funny underwear on. And so he, reached the people that, like Nick and the people from Marin that reached out and really hold you and take care of you, was vitally important to recovery. It's always, some people would go the other way. They didn't know what to say or what to do. But rest assured, if you have someone that's in grief, as much as they don't want it, they do appreciate it, the help and the support. And in fact, it was at Nick's party that we met Sean. And I was standing outside with Kimmy, and just kind of observing the party that was going on, and not really engaged, when he walked out and asked how we knew Nick, and asked if he could have a light for a cigarette. And Kimmy, I'll never forget, a very strong woman herself, puts her hand on my chest and says, I'll handle this, because she could tell I didn't want to answer. And she told Sean, and he pretty much put his cigarette out, and he asked if he could recite a poem. And it was actually lyrics from a song about heroes. And so he did. And then the rest of the night, he wouldn't leave my side. He was very protective and helpful and supportive. And, people can see when people are hurting, and it was very nice.
Brooke, Danny, do we have any questions from the audience that we can pass along to Jack?
think we do. Let me see here. So here's a question from Grant in New York City. He wants to know how you think history should remember Lauren, not just this 20th anniversary, but 50 years from today.
I would say that if anything, she should be remembered as a brave woman, a loving woman, and a woman who championed women's causes. She, I hope, inspires young women to never take anything sitting down, to be strong, to have, confidence, to try new things. For example, when she was taking up skydiving, for example, it was for her 30th birthday. And she wouldn't tell anyone what she was going to do that day. She'd already signed us up. So then that morning of her 30th birthday, I said, okay, what is it that you want to do? And she said, we're going skydiving. She said, you don't have to do it, but I'm doing it. And I go, okay. We got to pick a friend up that's flying in from Alaska, gregarious guy. And he gets in the car and he says, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to go sailing. We're going to go mountain biking. And I said, we're going to go jump out of a plane. And this guy's a radio DJ. He's a comedian, and he rarely is rendered speechless. But there was this long pause in the back seat, that quiet that I remember. And he said, I just got off a perfectly normal plane. Why do I want to get back on a small one and jump out of it? And I said, I'm not sure I want to either. Once we got to the airfield and they were doing their practicing, because it's a tandem jump, so you're attached to somebody. And Glenn and I looked at Lauren going through this practice, and we looked at each other and we said, we can't not go. And so it was just that sort of leadership that she had, that way she had, I'm going to do it. You can come along or not. And that resonates with me as to how she might have acted on the plane. We need to do this, or, you just stay there, somebody's got to do something. So it was that sort of command over life that she took that I think, I hope is inspirational to other young women in their lives.
That's great. And somebody asked when and where they can get a copy of the book.
Well, it will be published by Rare Bird Publishing, and we're going to publish it in April, because April would have been the month the child would have been born. So it would have been the child's 20th birthday, and it'll be a tribute to that unborn child. A lot of kids today, when I say kids today, I sound like an old guy, but there's a lack of awareness or interest in or just knowledge of what happened and who was on that plane. So hopefully it will let them know that they also lost a possible friend, because if you think about the child being 20 now, they might have been somebody else whose child is 20, best friend. And as I said, the collateral damage that happens to people who are killed tragically like this expands 6 to 8 fold. You have 6 to 8 people who are truly affected by the grief of losing loved ones. And the other reason I planned to do the book, or decided to go ahead with the book, was to share my 20 years of going through grief, in hopes that it helps any one of the 600,000 plus people who have lost someone tragically to COVID. And if you think about 6 people for every person lost times 600,000, we're going to have a tidal wave of mental injury, because this virus was an injury to the people who lost loved ones, and they'll never get them back. And it's hopefully going to help people get through some of the ups and downs that come along with the loss of a loved one that you just don't see. As I said, depression creeps in pretty quietly. I remember meeting a young man, Grant Wolcott, who went about his life after hearing his classmates refer to Flight 93 as the plane that didn't do anything. He took that and he said, I'm going to make it a mission to say, no, 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 that plane did everything. And a very admirable young man who I believe has done some work for the memorial.
Well, I'm going to end it there. Jack, is there anything you would like to say to our audience before we end here?
Just thank you for supporting and remembering our loved ones. Thank you for supporting the memorial. It means the world to us. And thank you for coming out on a summer evening when you had a whole lot of other things you could be doing that were a lot more fun than listening to me. But hopefully I've been able to touch people in a way that inspires or creates a feeling of, you know, love. You hug your loved ones. You know, we all say, oh, this would never happen to me. We felt the same way. Things like that would never happen to us, but it does. So take each day as a precious way of letting the people that are important in your life know that you love them and care about them.
Well said. And thank you, Tom. Thank you for moderating. Like we always say, we're so lucky to still have first-person accounts of this history to tell. So as we approach 20 years since 9/11 in September, we hope that everyone who joined us today will honor the 40 heroes in any way that you see fit. And lastly, we'll be holding another digital program next month, so we hope that you'll join us again. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Jack.
Bye.
Thank you.